Detroit's Powerhouse now runs on Japanese fuel. From Toyota to Subaru, 7 of Japan's biggest automakers have become the real drivers of Detroit's modern engine. Together, these brands support over 500,000 American jobs and bring in about $170 billion in U.S. car sales each year. But now, the White House is weighing a bold decision: a 25% national security tariff on foreign-made cars. If this goes through, it won't just raise sticker prices at the dealership. It could send shockwaves across the entire American auto industry, from Ohio's seat manufacturers to Alabama's steel mills. So the big question is, who wins and who loses if Washington decides to roll the dice on this new tariff? Let's break it down. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you stay updated with our latest content. What used to seem like a far-off policy debate is quickly turning into a real-world stress test for America's economy. Since the end of 2024, intense talks between Washington and Tokyo have already made their mark, showing up in policy papers, factory production plans, and job projections from Detroit to Kentucky and Texas. Here's the central issue. If Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, Mitsubishi, and Suzuki are forced to cut back or even leave the U.S. market because of this new 25% tariff under Section 232, how much will America lose? We're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in sales, and massive cuts in tax revenue. Let's look at the numbers. These 7 Japanese automakers account for roughly $170 billion in annual U.S. sales. They add about $47 billion in direct value to the economy. And when you include fuel services, auto parts, and related businesses, the total economic impact balloons to $1.3 trillion. To understand this, think of it like a simple table that sets off a housing boom in Turkey. Auto manufacturing triggers an entire chain of industries in the U.S., from steel suppliers and logistics companies to software startups writing car service apps. The ripple effect is enormous. Let's break down the production side. Toyota built 1.25 million vehicles in 2023 at plants in Texas, Kentucky, and Mississippi. Honda rolled out 970,000 units from Ohio and Alabama. Nissan produced 770,000 cars in Tennessee and Mississippi. Subaru added another 221,000 vehicles from its Indiana plant. The Mazda-Toyota joint plant in Alabama built 150,000 units. And although Mitsubishi no longer manufactures cars in Illinois, it still imports 75,000 rebadged vehicles into the U.S. every year. When you factor in imports, Japanese brands sold a total of 6.32 million vehicles in the U.S. in 2023. That's 43.6% of the passenger and light commercial market. Let's look at the sales growth. Toyota Lexus jumped from 2.1 million sales in 2022 to 2.28 million in 2023. Honda Acura rose from 1.22 million to 1.34 million during the same period. Other Japanese brands, Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, Mitsubishi, and Suzuki, have all seen similar growth. What's driving it? A recovery in chip supplies, booming demand for hybrids, and rising gas prices. In 2023, the average price per vehicle reached $38,650, pushing the total revenue for Japanese car makers in the U.S. to $169.7 billion. Out of that, about $31.3 billion flowed back into the U.S. economy through taxes, an amount that's more than some states' entire budgets for education and healthcare. But here's where the problem starts. Can Japanese automakers survive a 25% tariff hike? It's not like these companies aren't already building locally. For example, Toyota's San Antonio plant produces trucks with 65% North American parts. The Camry and Ray V4 from Kentucky factories are 72% North American. Honda's Civic, built in Ohio, is 68% North American. Nissan's Rogue, made in Tennessee, is 58% North American. Subaru's Lafayette plant uses 52% local content. But, the proposed tariff wouldn't only affect fully imported vehicles. It would also hit key components like batteries, transmissions, and electronics that come from Japan or Mexico. That means double penalties for the automakers, on both the cars and the parts. Margins in the auto industry are already pretty slim. Toyota North America sits at 7.1%, Honda at 5.6%, Nissan at 4.3%, and Subaru at 8.8%. Adding a 25% tariff could push some of these brands dangerously close to operating at a loss, especially with the extra costs of hybrid technology. That's why some companies are now considering pausing investments or even moving production out of the US. Let's break down the potential job losses. Toyota employs 35,200 people directly and supports 90,400 indirect jobs. Honda has 28,100 direct and 61,000 indirect jobs. Nissan provides 18,950 direct and 47,600 indirect jobs. Subaru employs 6,900 directly and supports 14,800 indirectly. The Mazda-Toyota joint venture has 4,800 direct and 9,200 indirect jobs. Mitsubishi employs 1,700 directly and 3,200 indirectly. Suzuki has 900 direct and 1,400 indirect jobs. Altogether, that's over 436,000 direct and indirect jobs at risk. And when you add another 113,000 induced jobs, positions supported by these workers' spending, and about 17,000 finance and white-collar roles, you're looking at more than 500,000 American jobs tied to these companies. In total, these jobs generate $93.1 billion in wages and benefits every year. In some key states, this industry supports between 11 and 22% of manufacturing jobs. If Japanese automakers pull back, Mississippi's unemployment rate could jump by 2.6 percentage points, while Alabama's could rise by 1.8 points. The Congressional Budget Office is already warning about potential tax revenue shortfalls if this scenario plays out. We're looking at an estimated loss of $18 to $21 billion in 2026, followed by another $26 to $28 billion in 2027. But this isn't just about corporate income taxes or payroll deductions. The losses would also stretch into other areas of the economy, including dealer fees that auto retailers depend on, logistics contracts for shipping and transporting vehicles, and trucking and rail leases tied to car deliveries. When you put it all together, the total tax revenue gap over 3 years could climb to between $58 and $62 billion. Now, some people think this won't be a problem because Korean, European, or domestic American car brands will just fill the gap. But the reality is more complicated. Georgia Tech's economic models suggest that only about 40% of the lost production will actually be replaced. In other words, even with other car makers stepping up, 60% of the shortfall remains. So what happens to that missing 60%? Well, most of it won't translate into new car purchases. Instead, people will likely stick with their used cars for longer, or delay buying altogether because of the rising prices. And it doesn't stop there. There's a financial risk looming over the bond market too. Right now, Japanese companies are some of the largest holders of U.S. debt, specifically $1.06 trillion in 30-year Treasury bonds. If tensions rise and they decide to offload even 5 to 6% of that debt, it could lead to a spike in 10-year Treasury yields by 30 to 45 basis points. What does that mean? Essentially, it would make borrowing more expensive for the U.S. government. So even though the tariff is expected to bring in $78 billion in revenue, much of that gain could be wiped out by the extra borrowing costs caused by bond market instability. But the ripple effects don't end with finances. Japanese automakers didn't just set up factories. They transformed American manufacturing itself. They introduced systems like lean manufacturing, which eliminates waste and improves efficiency, just-in-time delivery, so parts arrive exactly when needed. Cutting storage costs, Kaizen, a culture of continuous small improvements, and flexible line designs with live alerts, which help factories pivot quickly when demand shifts. These innovations revamped the entire subcontractor ecosystem in the U.S., from steel plants to tech suppliers. Today, roughly 197,000 American workers are trained in these Japanese manufacturing systems. If production moves overseas or slows down significantly, these practices, along with the decades of productivity gains they enabled, could disappear from American factories. This also impacts research and development hubs, employee training programs, and future innovation pipelines tied directly to Japanese investments in the U.S. Even consumer choices will take a hit. Right now, 3 out of every 5 hybrid cars sold in America are Japanese, and 2 out of every 3 subcompact SUVs are made by Japanese brands. If a 25% tariff is applied, the price of these vehicles could rise by an average of $4,400, including entry-level models that working families rely on. As a result, many buyers may switch to older used cars or turn to diesel trucks, which could, undermine both green energy goals and affordable transportation options. And while it might seem like American carmakers will benefit from this shift, the truth is more complicated. Most major U.S. auto brands, like Ford, GM, and Tesla, are laser-focused on going fully electric by 2030. They're not investing in new compact hybrid factories, and even if they change course today, it would likely take until 2028 to get any new production online. So in the short term, this tariff could create a perfect storm of economic problems. Supply chain bottlenecks, a boom in used car prices, slower GDP growth, rising inflation, and a drop in consumer confidence by about 6 to 8 points, according to projections. At first glance, a 25% tariff might sound like a bold America First strategy, but in reality, it risks pulling apart one of the most successful manufacturing ecosystems the U.S. has seen in the past 30 years. The consequences could include higher car prices for consumers, massive job losses in both the car industry and supporting sectors, and the gradual hollowing out of America's industrial base. Even if Japanese automakers don't immediately leave, the slowdown would still hit hard. Maintenance costs would rise, supply chains could break down, and the once powerful efficiency engine that drove U.S. manufacturing would begin to stall. So here's the big question. Is a 25% tariff really worth the risk? Let us know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss future updates like this.